I want to ask you a little bit about your experience at Northwestern Econ specifically. So if you can tell us about maybe some courses that you took or how you found like introductory sequences or anything like that.
Definitely. I really loved my time at Northwestern, and I really appreciated having both a quantitative and a qualitative major in my undergrad experience. For me, what I loved about the quarter system was that you could take a lot of different classes, and it made double majoring a little bit easier with a little bit of wiggle room. In the econ specific major, I found that the introductory classes were a bit harder than I was expecting. And I think for me, especially not having as strong of a quant background coming in to college, and then frankly, even after it, having to really work on it, the econ degree really gave me an opportunity and a chance to hone on those more quantitative skills, which also then in turn helped me with rationally thinking through problems, logically thinking through a sequence, and really understanding the value of data-based or fact-based decisions. And that intersection with eventually in my career, how I pulled out something that was more of an interpretation or a guess or futuristic strategy in thinking as well. I in particular really loved my intro to micro econ class. I found that to be just a really nice way to kind of get introduced to it. And I had a professor who was really involved with her students at the time, and she just really loved, getting to know your name and asking those questions in class. I think the macro classes were a bit harder for me. Intermediate micro and game theory was in particular a very difficult class. And once I got through the core curriculum for the basic requirement classes in econ, I really ended up loving the electives I took. I remember, there's a nonprofit an economics class that was just really interesting with what we looked at. And by far my favorite class at Northwestern, especially within the econ program, but even just in general, was behavioral economics. I found it to be a wonderful intersection between psychology and economics. And I found it to be very applicable to pretty much anything that I did after college, whether it was in the consulting space in a more traditional field, and even especially marketing and consumer behavior.
Since you have lots of experience in this, I want to ask you what you would tell women who don't think that economics is the field of study for them, or who are on the verge of abandoning that pursuit, and like how would you encourage them to persist?
It's a really great question. I think what I would first start out with is a quote from a manager of mine who I really loved and respected at my first job out of college. And when I was actually looking for this new job that I recently started, he could tell I really sensed imposter syndrome in trying to make a transition from operations into marketing. And what he told me was, there was a study that showed that men will apply for jobs that they're maybe 60% of the way qualified for, versus, women wouldn't even consider that. And maybe only 35% of women would ever look at a job that they're, not as qualified for, not 100% qualified for. And I think, what I'm learning a little bit later in my career, and I kind of also wish I'd known earlier, imposter syndrome is common. I think for me stems a lot out of fear, because I have a fear of being found out that I'm a fraud, for example, in anything I do. The reality I think that I've discovered in my experience is everyone goes through something for a first time, and there's a learning that's involved with it. And saying, I actually don't know this, but having a willingness to understand it actually exudes more confidence than insecurity. And the imposter syndrome for me has really been a tale around insecurity of, I was brought up with a way of, I always know the right answer. I'm always getting A's, always at the top of my class, and I always know everything. And it really makes me uncomfortable if I don't know it. And I think one of those things that I definitely learned through the working place for sure, and kind of also learned a bit in college, to a different degree with classes, was it's okay not to know something. It's really something where if you go in with, hey, you're learning and now you know what it's like to get through core classes and get these kind of grades that, seem or might feel abysmal or just really bad, those are all things that can be corrected and improved upon, and fundamentally you're learning something that will really, really benefit you to a large degree